OTB's The Hurling Pod with James Skehill and Paul Murphy.
Tá craobhna here in an Ashan Gailliam. People of Galway, we love you.
I don't want to leave the people of Waterford down, because they're my life, People of Waterford are my life, and I love me county,
We love John Malone.
It's almost like they're afraid to kind of go and hurl and just let themselves express themselves. It's like as if they're nearly afraid to make a mistake, and sometimes you have to make a mistake and just throw off that bit of nervousness and have a go.
Yeah, it's pure constipated hurling.
You are very welcome along to episode 12 of the Hurling Pod. It is now 3 wins from 3 for Limerick in the Munster Hurling Championship. They're assured of a place in the All-Ireland series, and they're pretty much qualified for the Munster Hurling final after the third straight championship game where they have reached the 30-point mark. But that's far from the full story. It was a game where Tipperary led after an hour at the Gaelic grounds last weekend. Gillane scored the third goal for the Shannonsiders, but should he have been on the pitch or should he have been sent off for a wild enough pull on Ronan Maher? We'll also be looking ahead to what's going to be a busy weekend where the qualification picture should be much clearer in both the Leinster and Munster Championships come Sunday evening. Delighted to say that we've got former Galway goalkeeper James Skehill with us, and also Kilkenny dual player Paul Murphy. How are you getting on, lads?
How are you getting on, lads? All good.
We want to get into Limerick, but we also want to ask you about this dual situation, Paul. You're getting ready on this Monday evening as we record the podcast to go to Kilkenny football training. Has Kilkenny football's demise been overwritten? You guys are getting back going again.
Yeah, look, we're getting back going again. Christy Welch is over the team as he has been for the last good few years now at this stage. But yeah, look, I suppose I can't really be called a dual player because I'm not playing with the hurling men anymore. But no, look, we played the Senior Football Club Championship. We started it earlier this year. Christy got in contact, and yeah, look, I'm more than happy to throw my lot in with the Kilkenny footballers. So we've I can't be listening to Skehill all evening now because I have to get ready for training, and 33 years of age now, I have to do a serious warm up. So that's the reason for Skehill to get off the line.
You're only going back into it for the expenses. That's why you remain quiet on the expenses.
Well, how long is this season then, Paul? Because you're going into the All-Ireland Junior Football Championship.
Yeah, exactly. So we're playing 2 matches basically this year. So look, again, off the ball, obviously covered the situation with Kilkenny football only maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. So not much has obviously changed in that time. But we're playing over a weekend. We're playing Warwickshire on Friday night in Abbottstown, and all going well, the winners of that, hopefully if we win that match, we'll be playing a New York team in the final in Croke Park on the Sunday. So look, that's what lads are looking to play for, and it's great. Look, I suppose to go by the phrase, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the second best time is now. Like, you need lads to get the show back on the road. You need lads to kind of, I suppose, put their shoulder to the wheel and get things going. And I'm happy to do that if like, I can do a service for the footballers. And look, if you get a day out in Croke Park, brilliant, and very few men can say they wore a Kilkenny football jersey in Croke Park.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, is there that hope that this can actually be something that be built on? Because I would think the attraction for a lot of lads going in for this would be a short enough season. You go in, you play 2 games effectively over a weekend, maybe to go to Croke Park. But longer term, say if Kilkenny are able to call themselves All-Ireland Junior Champions at the end of this, could we get to a point where Kilkenny are back competing in the league again, or is that a long way away?
It's probably a few years away, and I think the only hurdle that has to be crossed is just getting involvement back going. Like, at the moment, Kilkenny hasn't got a system in place where players could easily manage playing either club hurling and football and then inter-county football, because the hurling obviously has its stream at inter-county level, and we know the calendar and how it fits and how it sits. And also, again, players, I suppose, getting the bit of white space to step out from their clubs and play football and be recognised that, listen, I have inter-county football training, and that if football has its space, like at the moment we're training on Monday evenings, so that kind of has to be trashed out first. But we played my own club, Danesfort, senior football in Kilkenny, and once we got around and we played a few matches, like, yeah, you see the footballers are actually there to, if we got the best players on the pitch, Kilkenny next year could step back into Division 4 and, have a real crack at it. Okay, they're going to take beatings, absolutely, but get back into it and get back into the mix. It's maybe 10 years Kilkenny played Tipperary in Division 4, I think in Nolan Park. And look where Tipperary have gone. Okay, Tipperary have savage strongholds there in football, but there is people in Kilkenny, no more than myself, who are happy and who want to play football. And also we have people who are working down here. We have lads on the team who are from Tyrone, from Clare. There's people who are down here who come from football and strongholds as well. So certainly, look, the raw material is there to get it back up and going, and I think there is, a real want to get it back up and going. Okay, lots of people will still say focused on hurling, but all you need is a core group there to get it up and going again, and suppose get a bit of backing from the county board then to get it going, and that's your starting point. And look, we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah, naturally, look, there's an aspiration then if there's a team that's available and they believe that it's moving in the right direction. Might be lads who are interested in playing football who might hear about this now and go, yeah, I might just go back in and give it a crack again. Is this a one and done for you, Murph, with it? Like, are you going to go in probably for one season, or do you see yourself playing for a while?
I don't know, to be honest. I have no real plan past this year. That's not to say I'm not going back in next year, but like generally the way I am at the moment is I don't feel myself slowing down in terms of the body. I don't feel injuries coming on, looking after myself, and I'm kind of interested in, keeping it going in terms of, you go into the football setup. I feel the football setup benefits me going back to the club, because I'll go in tonight, get a bit of work done, get a nice bit of running done as well. We played a match yesterday with the club. It'll blow off the kind of the cobwebs and a bit of lactic acid and different things, and there's no doubt that getting in, and as opposed to do nothing this evening, get back in there and do a small bit. So it's not a case that I feel that I'm overworked or anything at the moment, that I think, look, I'm 33 years of age. Like if this year goes well and I feel, yeah, this is something I can manage, absolutely I'll go back in next year, and then see after that. I'm not saying I'm going to be kicking football when I'm 40 for Kilkenny, but look, you'd like to think there'd be more competitive younger lads coming along, but certainly if the body's feeling good and I have the bit of time to do it, absolutely I'll keep my lot in with Kilkenny footballers.
James, your second love was rugby rather than Gaelic football. Did you play much of the big ball along the way?
Football wise, not particularly. I played, we have a sister club here called St. Gabriel's down the road, and I suppose like that now is anything, like any ball you can get your hands on as a young fella, you're going to play that kind of sport. So it became a question whereby 2 sports was manageable, 3 sports wasn't. So I continued rugby and hurling from, let's say, 16 years of age onwards. After that, football took a backseat.
When did you actually finish playing rugby, by the way? I know we kind of spoke about this before, that Anthony Cunningham advised you give rugby totally the heave-ho and concentrate entirely on hurling. Like, were you playing up into your 20s then to play? No,
that was it. When that conversation with Anthony happened in winter of 11, that's when I stopped at 23. Yeah, I didn't keep it going. So the odd time then I was threatening to go back into a junior league, let's say, with a local club here, but just didn't have the grow for it, to be honest. Time as well, and as the inter-county hurling game got more demanding and faster, etc., you couldn't give yourself I suppose the opportunity to play 2 sports, because injuries in rugby they're quite prominent, so I couldn't risk it. So that's why that took a back seat at 23.
Yeah, I'm not trying to talk you into playing rugby now, but would you consider going back in and playing a bit of junior now that you're finished up with the county?
My brother-in-law is actually over the club, over Loughrea, but I don't know. It's injuries wise to say, like, even I've had a history of bad shoulder injuries, and so like that's a pretty key part of your body you're going to need in rugby, whether it be out over rucks or tackling, etc., lineouts, etc. So again, I don't know, I couldn't see myself doing it, Will, to be honest, because more than like Paul, I want to prolong my club hurling career as long as I can, and when you get up in the years, obviously a big part of that is avoiding injuries. So keeping myself out of a sport where injuries are quite prominent would be a good place to start, I think.
Yeah, look, you don't want the attrition coming on the body, and I'm sure there's probably plenty of our listeners and viewers at the moment who are going, why are you not talking about the Tipperary game against Limerick? So we can dive into that game in the Munster Hurling Championship. The final, no more is this deceptive than we spoke about last week, Skehill, where there was a 2-point win for Clare against Cork, but it felt like the margin of victory was much more. The margin of victory felt less having watched the game between Limerick and Tipperary, because you look at that final scoreline, it's Limerick 321, it's Tipperary 23 points, but it was really only in the final quarter of the game that Limerick had actually taken the ascendancy. Now, they finished the game very strongly, but if you were watching the game at 60 minutes gone, you wouldn't be thinking that Limerick were going to run out fairly comfortable winners.
No, I was tight, but you always got the overriding sense that it was just a matter of time, because obviously Limerick, like they were poor now by their own standards, to be honest, and like some of the players that you'd expect big performances of didn't show up, and I don't think that was a physical thing. I think that was actually mental on their behalf, which I'll touch on in a few minutes. But I always got the sense that just Tipperary weren't creating enough of a distance between themselves and Limerick, like for all the the shots that they had, but they were creating an awful lot to wides, and like still, if you didn't look at the scoreboard, you'd say to yourself, God, Tipp must be up 5 or 6 points here, but still they're only 1, 2 points, 3 points at most. So you're saying that's not enough, because Limerick, there's always a fight in them, and like I was wondering then, let's say with Tipperary, because they only got a true lead. Limerick only got a true lead like in the 64th minute, I think, where they took the lead, and then I was thinking, like, would a fear complex kick into Tipp here, like, and will they just roll over and die somewhat? But in fairness, they didn't. Like, they got struck for a couple of killer goals, and that put a bit of flattery on the scoreline, to be honest. But again, when you look at Tipperary's score, like 23 points looks okay on the books, but like they only got, what have I here? They've only got 11 points from play. It's not enough in comparison to Limerick scoring 315. So like if you're going to be hitting Limerick, you're going to have to be matching them, from play at least, if you're going to try and overtake them. But I think in terms of a day to get caught, that was the day for Tipp to catch Limerick, and it would have been a win of all wins, to be honest. And you could see that they planned well, first and foremost, with their distribution from puckouts by changing their goalie. I can think no other reason, bar an injury obviously, I can think of no other reason why they changed the goalie. And like, his distribution was excellent, it really was. Grandy got cut out one time for Hegarty in the second half, which became a bit of a highlight reel for one of the goals, fair enough, right? But I thought he was really good, and so it obviously showed that Colin Bonner put in a good plan. They acted on it. It was working fierce well. Ger Brown was creating an awful lot of havoc in the middle of the field there. They were nullifying the half-forward line from Limerick. They were nullifying their own half-back line as well. And things were moving nicely. They just didn't get enough on the scoreboard at that time. And like Limerick were, I would give them a 5 out of 10 for their performance overall, because even John Kiley said after that, I think he probably has some players in that dressing room who will be quite disappointed with their own performances, and maybe just there was a bit of I use the dreaded word complacency, but that's what it seemed like. But look, it was one lost, and even Colin Bonner, like, he had me going at the end. He was getting so excited for frees, I was nearly thinking, like, he was good, he was energetic, like, it's what you want to see, so but I just think it was kind of an opportunity lost for Tipp.
Yeah, Paul, when you consider that performance it was very middling from Limerick, really up until an hour gone, and then a very strong finish, and look, a few inspiring scores within there too. Like, you think of particularly the Declan Hannon one, which was a huge lift to the point when the game was in the melting pot, and Nash going up the field and getting a score and giving a fist pump afterwards, and you just felt it was in an arm wrestle. It was starting to go in Limerick's direction when those scores happened, and then, as James mentioned, the 2 goals inside the last 6 minutes of the game were complete killers for Tipperary. But when it comes to Limerick and the mentality going into it, did you get that feeling as well, that the flatness was actually down to a sense of, right, they've gone out there and won their first 2 games, they've beaten Waterford, had a bit of a break, and that maybe they weren't quite on it going into the game yesterday?
Yeah, I think there was a huge part of it, because we're not questioning were Limerick man for man worse than Tipperary yesterday, or were they completely outbeaten? No, they weren't. It really came down to, I felt the flatness and just complacency of potentially maybe believing what was said during the week. Like, no more than myself, I said last week on the podcast, that I expected this to be a heavy beating for Tipperary, and I think everybody kind of expected that. Maybe even the Tipperary fans, by not showing up in huge numbers yesterday, expected that. But the first 10 minutes, like, Tipperary didn't come flying out of the blocks. Okay, Ger Brown got a great point at the start, but they didn't come flying out of it. And by the time Aaron Gillane got his goal, the first goal, it was kind of a case of thought, okay, everybody was kind of maybe going, okay, this is what we expected to see happen, and now Tipp and Limerick are going to kick on. But they didn't kick on, and when they didn't kick on, Tipp seemed to nearly get a smell of that and go, okay, actually we're still in this. And next thing, Tipp started to get their scores, and there was a little bit of caginess crept into the Limerick game. And for me, Limerick were kind of tipping in maybe third gear, and I actually said it when I was watching the match. I said, they're in third gear here, and it seems like enough. But then when it wasn't enough and Tipp were coming back at them, and Tipp started hitting them, and then they started breaking down the ball around the middle of the field and turning it over and getting scores, suddenly I think Tipp realised, actually, these lads aren't on song today, and they started to feed off that and come back at Limerick, and that's where the caginess happened. And again, I've referred to it several times. When we played Limerick the last time they lost in the Championship in 2019, again, very similar setup coming into it. We had beaten Cork, but the narrative really was that, okay, they bet Cork, but that's about it for Kilkenny now for this year. And I think that fed into the Limerick camp. And the problem was, I suppose, the difference between ourselves in 2019 semi-final and Tipp yesterday was that we had the firepower and we created the distance. When we got the goal chances, Colin Fennelly got the goal and it created the distance. And what happened then was, a lot of people would agree or would say that Limerick ran out of time. Well, they did run out of time. Yesterday, if you think of the Michael Breen goal, or you think of, I think it was Flynn got a ball in front of goal and Barry Nash got a great block, and Michael Breen had another chance again, a ball broke around the square, and he just flicked it wide. Like, if they got one or two of them, which they could have, that could have been the distance where we saw Limerick take the lead in the 64th minute yesterday. Well, it might have been a gap too far for them then at that stage. And it wasn't because they were completely outworked. It was literally just because they came into the game flat. Maybe, it got inside their heads during the week that, they're going to turn up, they're going to turn over this Tipp team and they're going to march on. And that just wasn't the case. So I think it's something that John Kiley has to look at, because there was a few performers again like yesterday that, again, Will O'Donoghue, we're talking about him being the enforcer of Limerick. 54 minutes, I have him down for 3 possessions. Now, in fairness to his counterpart, Darragh O'Donovan put in a really great shift. I think he had about 14 possessions, which he was, made a few mistakes, but he was putting in the work there. But there's a few lads there that just kind of, didn't. Dan Morrissey, again, 3 possessions in 68 minutes. There's a lot of lads there that will kind of look. Whereas the other side, Sean Finn on the ball the whole time, Barry Nash driving forward. They still did have their few lads. Cathal O'Neill chipped in with 2 points. So they did have lads on song, but I think something John Kiley will be looking at going forward is, this complacency. This can't carry on, because if they do come up against a team, and like Clare is another one, Clare is a dangerous game for them. If the narrative around the Clare match is that they're expected to turn them over, like Clare have a bit more firepower at the moment than Tipperary. So James said it, the complacency for me was the big part with Limerick going into the match yesterday, and I just think it's something that they need to really work on going forward.
Yeah, we're kind of looking forward a little bit here, James, when it comes to that Clare game. But given the way they performed, Kiley said he wasn't overly happy with the performance, but they got the job done yesterday. Does he now go strong against Clare to make sure that they're actually coming out of the Munster Championship in flying form, as opposed to, like, the job is pretty much done. We know they're in the All-Ireland series. It would take a hell of a swing for them not to qualify for the Munster final because of the position that they're in. But does he go in hard now into that Clare game to try and get a victory in Ennis to make sure they're...
I think he does, but also signs are on. Remember was the Munster final last year, he didn't start Gillane. And look at Gillane now is probably the front runner for her at the minute. So it's not beyond Kiley and his management team to drop, not start prominent players. But if I was to pick out people from yesterday's performance, I had Jimmy Burns as hurler of the year up to yesterday, and he'd kind of flattered to kind of impress. And Paul touched on Will O'Donoghue. I was extremely surprised. You'd see him on loads of possessions throughout every game, winning frees and turning over people and fist pumping, and he's a major nucleus of that team. Didn't show up at all. And you can see what happens with Limerick when one or two guys don't perform. The whole the level of performance drops. So it's not beyond Kiley. Will he do it though? I don't think so, because I think there's obviously recognition there that Clare are going well too. Obviously it's a big game of the weekend, don't get me wrong. So I think he's going to go with a full deck. It's the last game, and even Limerick, just by the look of the draw, in fairness, if Limerick comes through this with a victory, they've some 3 weeks off or something like that into a Munster final. So they've a good blast of break where they can get a bit of work in. So I'd imagine what would happen is Kiley go with a full deck, throw the house at Clare and see where it brings them, and then probably introduce some of the younger the guys. I probably expect Seamus Flanagan to start too. I know Cathal O'Neill came off yesterday with a sprained ankle that was mentioned, so you'd see probably a bit of a rejig in there. Possibility probably Kyle Hayes going back to 11, Seamus back into 14, so you could see the kind of the 2018 shape, if you like. But to answer your question, I think full duck, no dinner. That's what Kylie's going to do at the minute, and put down Clare, I'd imagine.
Just to pick up your point, James, on Diarmaid Byrnes, again, we were all talking him up over the last few weeks, and he's hurling remarkably well up until that game against Tipperary. But Tipperary did a really good job of getting players around him, of putting puckouts down that side and having extra players around. They created overloads at different times. I guess you got to give credit to Tipperary tactically for the way that they hurled on Byrnes yesterday.
Absolutely, and they shortened up the puck out a bit. So I remember Brendan Cummins referencing a long time ago to me about when he was playing Kilkenny, doing one-on-ones versus Tommy Walsh and JJ. It was just a waste of time to say. So they shortened up the puck out a small bit and created, instead of one-on-ones, it was 2v2s, 3v3s. So at least get the ball to ground. You've bodies. So there's a bit of work to do for the in that instance, Kilkenny backs to come out. So that's what happened yesterday, in the sense that Ger Brown, I know he created havoc, you see. So if you just introduce a small bit of confusion to a backline, like even as prominent as Limerick now, I have to say, you'll get some fruition off it. So I thought Tipp's plan was really good, and it's a bold move, changing a goalie in the middle of a championship game, to be honest. And even for him to come in cold, he came in cold. As I said previously, I thought his distribution was excellent, and he picked off a whole host of short puckouts, which caused Limerick an awful lot of problems in the first half. And when he went long to where they had numbers. So you didn't get the the inspirational catch of a Jimmy Burns or the inspirational catch of a Declan Hannon. You got numbers around the ball, and then you put in a good honest work ethic, which is what Tipp had yesterday, and then you mix that in with the likes of Noel McGrath, who was, I thought he was excellent yesterday, albeit he didn't score a monstrous amount from play, but he took the charge to Limerick yesterday, I thought, especially in the first half, by distribution and opening up players. So I thought Tipp came in with a really good plan, just wasn't enough, like I say, and I don't think he was for want of the plan. I just think he was the want of straight up 15v15 in terms of player quality, they probably just didn't have it, to be honest.
Yeah, Paul, we spoke a lot about the players that Tipperary didn't have available. Look, injury has ripped away a core group, particularly in their forward line, the players that they've lost this year. And we speak nearly every week about the fact that it's difficult for any team to transition and bring in new players when Brendan Maher is there, Paddy Maher is not there. But the one thing to probably take from the first few games, and look, they'll be disappointed with how they hurled against Clare. As good as Clare were, Tipperary were below their normal level. But these young players played well against Waterford. They've played well now against Limerick. A Tipperary fan might come out and think, right, Tipperary's championship year is coming to a close. They're not going to qualify. But still, they're getting to see some of these players who were so good at under 20 level and didn't get much of a shout in the 2020 or 2021 seasons, now coming to fruition and actually hurling quite well. This could be a case of a little bit of short-term pain and maybe long-term.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose the tough thing to try and do is, how do you phase these players into a team, into a panel over a year or two, over 3 years, because that's what it takes. You don't step out of minor and under 21 or under 20 as it is now. You don't step out of it into inter-county. It just doesn't happen. You see the size of the players there at the moment, and physicality isn't everything, but it is a huge part of it. Getting to the pace of the game, like, when you're under 20, you're a big fish in a small pond if you're capable of stepping up to inter-county. But once you get up to inter-county, you suddenly go back to being at the lower levels, and you're getting hit fairly hard. So for Tipperary, there's no doubt they have players coming through, and at the end of the day, you only have to take about 3 players from any underage group each year or so. If even you're lucky to take 3 players, some years you might only take 1 player. But there is a phase where these players have to step in. Like, ideally, you would like to see these lads step in maybe a little bit more for Tipperary anyway, with Jamie Callan, with Paddy Maher, with Bonner Maher and these lads, because it's huge. We kind of see it with Clare at the moment, where these lads are stepping in now with Tony Kelly and these lads, and they kind of have a bit more of a balance of that experience and youth. So for Tipperary, they kind of do have to go through these, I suppose, years, 1 or 2 years, maybe 3 years of where these players are stepping in, finding their feet, getting to the pace of inter-county consistently over a few years. And look, that doesn't happen overnight. You just have to go and do it. But at the same time, they are doing it. There's a few lads stepped up yesterday, in fairness, and there's no tougher place than step up in the Gaelic grounds against Limerick. They did it again, like you said, they did it down in Welsh Park against Waterford. So they are seeing lads doing it, and for the likes of, I suppose, Jake Morris, who's the only established person out of that group who's been there and played in All-Ireland finals, the rest of them just have to go through this, I suppose, teething phase and learn the ropes and become really strong players. But it's not all doom and gloom for Tipperary. And in fairness, yesterday, look, Tipperary people are proud. They won't be taking an 8-point beating and try and put a silver lining on it and be proud about it. But at the end of the day, call a spade a spade. There was lots of people talking of a 20-point beating here over the weekend, but they went at it, and there was probably not a whole lot on stake. Okay, technically they weren't out of qualification yesterday before the game, but they were going for a moral win here yesterday if there was anything on the line, and they came away with a lot of stuff. They came away with a lot of good stuff, to be fair to them. And look, there's a lot of Tipperary people, like I said, will be turning around saying that's not good enough for Tipperary. Tipperary want wins, they want to win Munsters, they want to win All-Irelands. But when you're introducing these players, you can't expect to flick a switch overnight. And maybe the argument Tipperary supporters would have had over the last few years is these players maybe should have been introduced, maybe, like you said, 2020, 2021, even drip feed them in 1 or 2, that maybe their time to step in is coming a little bit late, so they'll just have to, I suppose, forego that little bit extra time for these players to hit their peak.
Look, again, I can understand where Sheedy was coming from over the last couple of seasons. He had a core group of players that had won an All-Ireland in 2019. In his first spell, those players have been the young players coming through. You're going to have a certain commitment towards them, and therefore you're going to play them. But it just seems that maybe injuries and retirements have now forced the hand a little bit to allow these players to all come through in one batch of players. It'll be intriguing to see what shape Tipperary are in going into the summer of 2023. Now, understandably, James, almost every question that came in overnight in the Instagram, left it open. What do you want answered? I would say 75% of them were, what are your thoughts on the Gillane incident, where he was not shown a red card, he was shown a yellow card. The Gillane pull, what's a yellow, what's a red these days? It's clearly in reference to the Gillane red card incident. Did Gillane try and play the ball, or did he just swing with a hurley? basically it's a constant stream of these comments coming in. It's been massively talked about. I've heard some people say, James, it was an orange card, it was somewhere between yellow and red. Was reading Brian Gavin in the Irish Examiner, writing with the fact that in his feeling, if he was on the pitch, and Brian Gavin was a referee who had definitely a reputation for allowing things to flow and not being particularly picky with red cards along the way. He felt it was a red card. We've argued about it a bit in the WhatsApp group since the incident yesterday. On the TV, Anthony Daly felt it was a yellow card. Jackie Tyrrell and Davy Fitz on the Sunday game felt it was a yellow card. What's James Skehill's take on it? Yellow or red?
Now, before we get into this, Skehill did say he was going to reserve his judgment for the WhatsApp, so I'm waiting.
He gave
for this
none of it away. I couldn't believe it, because I was like, let's just outline all of our positions here.
In fairness, I was having a few pints at the time, so I said if I took off into a debate, I could say Anthony.
But instead, Skehill goes, no, save it for the pod. So here we are.
Yeah, cryptic. Now, Skehill, you have the floor.
Okay, I'll start hard. For me, it's 100% red card. And why? Why, says you? So, when Ronan Maher's going down for the ball, that's when Gillane initiates his strike. Gillane pulls about a foot over the ball, nowhere near it. Do you know? Regardless if he has two hands on the hurler or one hand, he pulls with full intent to do damage. That's it. And people are saying, Ronan Maher took a look up at the referee. Irrelevant in my book. That's irrelevant. Like, fair enough, he did take a look up to see was the referee watching, but the crime was committed as far as I'm concerned. And like, there's no getting around it for me. You can try and tailor, you can kind of create a narrative to say, that toughness in hurling is gone, or he didn't mean it, he was going for the ball. He wasn't. Like, there's plenty of angles there to show that when he pulled, he wasn't intent to get the ball. And like, you know, like Murph, you've done this an awful lot more than I have. But when the ball is there, you're not going for a big strike. Like, you're going, if your man's going to lift it, you're going for a tap to get it off. Yeah. You know going into that challenge, right? I'm not going to get the ball here. I'm not going to get it in time if I go for a pull. So you change your tactic and you go to tip it off him. That's what you do. And so don't tell me that the Gillane was trying to do that. He was going to do damage. And this is his second time in 2 years to do it against Tipp. So I'll repeat, lads. Carter Jarrett.
Right. He should definitely have been sent off last year. I think none of us are going to argue, but that should have been a red card in 2021. Yeah. This one, I think context is all important with the way the swing happens too. And this is something that Brian Gavin brought up in the Irish Examiner, which I think is a very good point, which is that if Aaron Gillane is front facing and he's going in to try and pull on the ball, and Ronan Maher adjusts his position at the very last second and sweeps in with his hand and gets hit in an instant where Gillane is trying to pull forward, you could understand, or he's trying to flick the ball away. Mm-hmm. The thing is that Gillane comes in quite hard and almost kind of pulls out of the stroke to a certain extent, and I take that mitigation. But why is he stroking James away from goal in that way?
Why is Gillane stroking away from the goal?
Like, it's not a natural tackle angle to go in hard. Like, surely if you're going in as a forward in that instance, you'd be going to try and flick the ball as opposed to trying to pull on it.
That's what I mean. Like what I was saying to Murph a second ago, you know you're not going to make it when you're going for the pull. So you haven't got, the timing is wrong. You have too much distance to cover. I'm not going to pull it. So because the man is ahead of me, so you change up and you go for the flick. I fully believe that Gillane said, I'm going to pull a stroke here. And then when he and just left the hurling, like I won't say left the hurling, but he gave it and he tried to do a bit of damage. Like, just I don't know. I don't think he actually he intended to go really hurt Ronan Maher, but I do think he intended to give him a slap. Honest to God, I do. And like he's running away from the goal. He's looking at the ball. He knows he's pulling a foot above it, so he's just giving him a slap. And I think he has it in his full head that he's going to get away with it. And like I'd be interested to hear the counter arguments, because if you just think of this logically, like, did he strike the man? Did he get the ball? No. Did he strike the man? Yes. Was there intent? In my view, yes. So that's a red, you know. And I get what you're saying about he tried to mitigate it by, you know, reducing the power of his swing, but he still swung. Like, when you compare it then to the likes of, I know I'm not really comparing apples with apples here, but when you compare it to Ian Galvin's incident, you know, the week before. Like, come on, so what kind of damage are we talking about here? You know, so look, it's a red. People can form whatever arguments they want to counter what I'm saying, but I made it up.
Right, so, go on, Murphy. Give us the counter argument here, because I'm guessing you're saying as a defender and a guy who's probably pulled a few strokes over the years, you're going to go yellow.
Oh, he has.
Yes. Have I?
Actually, I haven't, in fairness to Devil.
Yeah, I haven't. No.
I let her come down now and play a football game against you.
yeah, it's different than the football. No, I'll be honest. When I saw it, when I was watching the match live, as soon as he pulled, I said, "Oh, you're gone." I was talking out loud to myself, and I said, "You're gone. He's finished. That's it. His red card." And then I saw it back and I was kind of going, oh geez, I don't know. But I still thought I believe the referee would send him off because it just didn't look good. And the referee can only see it once and he has to go with whatever. But I came back then, I kind of said, no, maybe it is a yellow. Now, the problem with this is, and this is why we're seeing it being so hotly debated, and thankfully we have something pulling us away this week from a handshake, but like it is a tough one. Like, it's a tough one to try and kind of figure out, because I understand completely what you're saying there, James, that there was intent. He's pulling very hard away from the goal, from his own goal. But at the same time, I'm looking at it going, he went in hard. He could have done a lot worse. If he really wanted to hurt him, he could have kept two hands on the hurl there now and kept full power, but he did go to pull out. And I on the flip side, I would say I know what it's like to run hard into a tackle there, and as you're running to the tackle, you think you're going to get it, and the player does something enough that you go, wait now, I'm going to destroy someone here, and you just pull out for a second. You still hit him, you still give a yellow card, but I know what it's like that you're going for a tackle 100% and you go to pull out. What I will give Aaron Gillane credit for, I don't think he went to completely. I think he ran going, yeah, I'm going to get to this ball, and if I hit Paddy Maher or if I hit Ronan Maher when I'm doing it, grand, that's fine, take man and ball. But I think once he realised he wasn't going to, he could have destroyed Ronan Maher there if his intent was really there to do it. So he pulled out at last second, one hand on the hurl, and he let it off. He let go of the hurl as well, I'm fairly sure, and the hurl flew, which kind of even made it look worse. So my argument there was, I saw a lad running hard for the ball at the start, and again we have the benefit of replay. I saw him running hard for it at the start, fully believed to the last second he was going to get it. Okay, he was going to pull hard, but if we think of where the match was at that stage, we were seeing big tackles going in. You know, Cathal Barrett came out with the ball, I think he won a great free, Gillane got bottled up. Like Colin Bonner on the sideline was leaping up and down the sideline, fist pumping. So, you know, the red mist was ascending in the match there, and players, you know, could have lost the run themselves. But I'll give Gillane the benefit of the doubt there that he did just pull away, and like Ronan Maher played on the rest of the game, he didn't have a bad injury. So for me, in hindsight, and like the other side of it is, Gordon, the referee, didn't have a replay. I think it was yellow afterwards, but again, great having hindsight. But it's one of those ones, I think someone can be swayed with a good enough argument. Someone can be swayed on this one to go red or yellow, but I'm sticking in the yellow camp for that one.
Yeah, my initial reaction on this, lads, was 100% red card the first time I saw it. I thought Gillane is walking. I thought by Gillane's reaction, he thought he was probably going to be walking too. So for me, it's above a yellow card, but I do take the factors that have just been mentioned by Paul.
Above the yellow, what's above the yellow card?
Well, that's what I mean about the orange card. This, I think, was Jurgen Klopp earlier this season when he spoke about, you know, there's yellow card offences that maybe aren't quite a red, but are definitely above a yellow. Yeah, I think it's above a yellow card offence. But
can I ask you, did he strike him?
He did, yeah, he hits him. And the other thing as well, and this is really important, is that it's not like it's a ground stroke and just out of nowhere Ronan's hand comes around and just nicks the ball a second before he was due to make contact with the ball. His hurl is actually reasonably high, even if he's trying to pull out with the tackle. And that has to be taken into account too. Like, even if he hadn't pulled his stroke a little bit, he was probably going to take the man one way or another, right?
Yeah. Oh, well, by the time he'd committed where he was, like, Ronan Maher was getting the good news, and that was it. So whether it was going to be a hurl hitting him or he was going to stand on him, I don't know. But it was too late to pull out of the tackle at that stage.
Yeah.
Right, so if we agree then, James, that this was a wild stroke, and people can make their argument about whether they felt it was a red or a yellow offence, I think we're all kind of leaning a bit towards red here, to be fair. Is it also a very silly move by Gillane when the game was in the melting pot to potentially get himself sent off if the referee had made another decision? Because, like, you're a long way away from your own goal. It's a reckless stroke at a time when you could really cost your team if they gone down to 14.
Yeah, like it's a risk-reward ratio. Like, so if he risks that, what's his reward? Nothing. If he wins the ball, fair enough. But he's risking by pulling that kind of stroke. You know, it's crazy. Like, and he should have been sent off last year. And if he was sent off last year, he's missing a couple of games. So when you get sent off and you go into like a hearing and they take your previous disciplinary record into consideration, you know, sometimes it works in your favour. But in this instance, like, I think that could have been used against him yesterday. You know, and I know he'll say, sure, he didn't get sent off last year, but he should have been. And he was sent off in the league. So like, it's not beyond him, to be honest. Now, and I will say about Liam Gordon, I know Liam personally, he's extremely level, a neutral, calm referee. So like, he would have made a very, very calculated decision. Like, he wouldn't get swayed by crowd or swayed by, you know, people shouting at him. Like, so I think that if he gave a yellow, he fully believes the time it's only a yellow. He's not just giving a yellow to save himself. You know, that wouldn't be his form at all. But for me, I just think it's a momentary slip it's a momentary slip of madness in Gillane's mind, as far as I'm concerned. I know you'll say, it doesn't look that bad, and he struck another couple of scores after, but like, I'm convinced he intended to do what he did, and I think he went in with the view, as I said, to do a little damage, or as Paul says, give him the good news, but not do a lot of damage. Like, as Paul said, he could have flitted him. He could have let rip and potentially break his hand or break his wrist, or go ahead kneecap, but he didn't. But he just gave him, for me, he did it hard enough and intentional enough that he meant to do what he did, and just to give a little bit of damage, to let Maher know he's there somewhat. So look, I can talk about this to the cows from home. It's a red card. I can't.
But the other side of it as well is, like, there are people, and what you were saying, that it was not a silly move out of him at this stage of the game, when the game was in the jaws and going to go one way or the other. Seamus Flanagan in the league, Aaron Gillane in the league, Gearóid Hegarty in the league. Like, there is form there, and it's something that we addressed in the podcast, that we were questioning, why did they suddenly randomly do this, and are they in control of it? And we talked about that if lads are getting in your face to try and annoy you, that's probably to try and get you sent off. Well, one thing the Limerick lads kind of have shown is that there is a little bit of form there to push it too far in a silly way. Like, I mean, there's no good red card, but they're certainly playing hard and getting 2 yellow cards. It's completely different to you're hurling well, you're after scoring 1-5, and then suddenly you pull a swipe on a fellow when a team needs it. That's different red card altogether in my book. So if we have seen Anton, we've seen 4 examples this year. Well, we'll call it 3 because Gillane didn't get a red card. But if Gillane got sent off on Sunday, we wouldn't be arguing here really at the same time. We'd be going like, Liam Gordon was fully justified to send him off if he wanted. It's a very hard one to call. So they could be looking at 4 red cards already this year for very silly red cards. Seamus Flanagan's was silly. Aaron Gillane's one against Clare, silly. Gearóid Hegarty's, silly. Yeah. But this one would have been just the 4th one in that list. So again, it definitely is something that we talked about previously. Is it still there? Probably still is, and it's probably still part of Limerick playing on the edge. But it's something that, as James was saying, risk reward. It could end up being too much of a risk one of the days. And let's say Tipp get 2 goals in that match, Aaron Gillane gets sent off, Limerick lose. So very fine margins here.
Yeah, but even the type of red cards they're getting as well, Murph, like, they're not getting 2 yellows for persistent fouling or for a couple of drag downs. They're getting them for strikes. For strikes in difficult spots, like, so there is form there, so, and these red cards seem to come at a time when the games are kind of, as Paul said, in a melting pot, or they're intense, or they're highly amplified by activity on the sideline. They seem to come at the same type of time, if you get me. Like Hegarty's was obviously, there was a bit of kerfuffle, let's say, on the sideline against Galway. Same with Flanagan, the man after getting sent off, and crowd getting excited. So it seems to happen. I don't know, do they get kind of carried away in themselves a bit? I doubt we'll ever see Hegarty do that kind of action again. But if you were to ask me, nor Flanagan, to be honest, but if you were to ask me, is it within Gillane? It is. I have to say categorically it is. And he's shown it like in the last couple of years. So I wonder what teams will do to him now, like in terms of applied pressure. We spoke about it before, let's say, because he can be. I don't know, is this the right way to say it, but he can be got at, like, he can be even emotionally hijacked, I think, with persistence, tight marking, etc., and even maybe tight tackling, etc. So it's hard to know what he'd do at any given time. And then the question I have to ask is, it could be a stupid question because he's in sublime form, right? But does he become too high a risk for a team going down the line? Do you see an incident, let's say, where they're in the middle of a flipping Munster final and they have to check him off because he's his liability? Is that even a factor? Because Kylie knows him better than we know him. So, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, throw that across to you, Murphy. This was the Austin Gleeson argument that we had earlier this season when he picked up a fairly foolish red card against Wexford, and we were wondering, like, what's the mentality around this? Would there be a concern that, in his case, his team were literally bloody 5 goals up at the time that he pulls the stroke, so he should never have got himself sent off. But will there be any concern? Like, Kylie has benched Gillane before. Like, he benched him for the Munster final last year.
Yeah, I think, like, it not after this one, but certainly if it comes to a stage where he feels that his hurling is losing out to his temperament on the pitch. Like, we saw Seamus Flanagan, if I'm correct in saying, that's the first time we saw Seamus Flanagan since he was sent off. Now, could be wrong, he maybe came on in one of their games, but like, Seamus Flanagan was looking good for 14 there until you know, maybe wasn't getting on enough ball, and then silly red card. And like, you have the likes of Conor Boylan and these lads really chomping at the bit, David Reedy and these lads busting to try and get in. So like John Kiley will be looking at it going, like, Aaron Gillane at this stage is on for, like, he's probably hurler of the year at the moment. Like, again, long way to go, but I don't see. Maybe this was the warning that John Kiley will be saying to him, listen, come on now, you were lucky to get away with it. And if Aaron Gillane has any sense, he knows this as well. I don't see Aaron Gillane going down that far of being a complete risk, because even the most, I suppose, the hot-headed, tempered players would kind of, once they get their little, I suppose, back to reality red card, they tend to cop on a small bit then. Like Austin Gleeson got his red card, came on, had a great match against Tipperary, like, but I don't think so. I don't think Aaron Gillane is going to go that far down the road that he's so hot-headed. I think it's just more a little bit, look, not to say foolish or anything like that, but it was a silly move. It was just a silly move. So I don't think it becomes a big problem. If Anton, it's a little bit of a godsend now for John Kiley that he can reference it and say to Gillane, we need you on the pitch. We need you scoring 2-5. We don't need you scoring 1-4 and getting sent off, and then you're gone for a month and no Munster final for you, and then suddenly someone comes in and takes your position. That's the reality, because they have players that can do that. So I think bit of a reality check for Gillane, but I still think I don't think it knocks a funk out of him yet.
Yeah, looking at some of the rest of the comments that come in on Brew on YouTube last week. Bit of a mystic looking forward. Will we ever see the sport of hurling played in line with its rules? Again, here we are a week on arguing over whether a stroke is a yellow card offence or a red card offence. So on Brew knew in advance of the weekend that was going to happen. We've also had a question in about what would have happened in the circumstances that Gillane gets sent off. Look, Gillane gets sent off, he's not drifting in behind for that third goal, which really killed the game. But also, what do the guys think? So I'll throw it to you first, Skehill, on this. Could Tipperary have held on if Limerick had to adjust if they'd gone down to 14 men? So Gillane gets a red card. Would that have been enough to keep Tipperary in front?
I just think the landscape would certainly change, because Tipperary obviously have an extra defender, and they get an awful lot of their scores, I say, by putting balls into the corner, into their two corner forwards. And if that could be nullified, it changes things an awful lot. Like, could Tipperary have scored more? It's hard to think, even if they had a spare man, would they have scored more than 23 points? I don't know. What would Limerick have ended up with? Another great question. Okay, it's impossible to tell. I certainly think the gap wouldn't have been 7 points. Would Tip have won? God, you'd have to say that they were within a great shout. They'd be within a great shout, wouldn't they? Like, they'd definitely be, much better set up in the back. They'd have a spare man for their own puck out. So that if they had a spare man for their own puck out, then they gain more distance, on the secondary ball into their own forwards. Like, it changed the whole landscape of the game. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say they would, yeah. Let's do it, yeah. Chip win the game.
Right.
Chip win the game.
Skehill has spoken. Murph, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd actually go and agree with him. One thing,
what?
I agree with you. Mad, it's mad. Like, as I always say, a stop clock is right twice a day. So, no, but like, it's one thing I would have always felt over the years, and we saw Tipperary when Tipperary were playing against Waterford. Let's say when under Derek McGrath and Waterford started playing a sweeper system, and then we would have saw Tipperary then playing Paddy Maher was always the sweeper. I always thought there was no better team for some reason in the country than Tipperary. They just seem to deploy this sweeper really well. And I think what happens is if Gillane gets sent off, what we see is, I do think we would see Limerick up their work rate, and it's a different story. But I think Ronan Maher fills in what Paddy Maher used to do and stands on that D. And Cathal Barrett and Barry Heffernan, these boys who would have played in that system, suddenly now, okay, Barry Heffernan was out in wing back there at the weekend, but these lads start suddenly filtering that ball through Ronan Maher. And now, like, Limerick are in trouble. They're fighting really hard, but they're not playing as part of a system because they're a man down, and Tipp are utilising this. And I think Tipp smell blood at that stage as well, and they go, lads, if we see this out, this is an enormous victory, and it's right in front of us now. So with a spare man, Tipperary down through the years have been excellent at it, and I would give him a serious shout at holding out if that was a red card.
Sticking around Gillane here, because I want to ask you as our resident cornerback here, Paul, what you do with the problem like Gillane because of his movement, and particularly his movement so close to goal, because like he drifts in behind for just a second for that third goal, and it's enough to give him a yard. He's so good with his paw. Like, we've spoken about this so many times. If Limerick playing a good diagonal direct ball to Gillane, he's so good at winning his own possession. Even sometimes when he's up against defenders who have a few inches on him height-wise, he's so good in the air, and he's so good at taking it down and then adjusting to take the shot afterwards. do you always have to stay goal side of Gillane, or what do you do if you're marking him? Because we spoke about this before, like once he got in behind the Cork defence in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, he did against Waterford too. Like, this is a guy who's incredibly dangerous if he gets any kind of sniff closer to goal. How do you deal with Gillane, and how tight do you have to mark him and stay behind him?
Yeah, it's something that we again would have looked at in the semi-final 2019. I think the only way, like, if he wants to go behind you, again, you just have to ask yourself the question: why does he want to go behind me? He wants to go behind me so he can drift left or right. I won't see him, creates a bit of space. The better option there is, even if he goes as far as the end line, will you stand off the pitch and stand where everything you need to know is out in front of you, where Gillane is in front of you, ball is out in front of you, and go 50-50 try and beat him in a foot race. Now, he's electric pace, grand, but at least everything you need to know about marking him is out in front of you. He's not behind you, he's not drifting. Where is he gone? Is he left or right? You know, Hughie Lawler in 2019 did it really well. Now, Gillane still got a few scores, but when Gillane got those balls, Gillane was in front of Hughie Lawler, and he struck a few wides because Hughie now had him there in that area, and Gillane tried to strike him over the shoulder, hit one wide. He got another score out of it, grand. But I'd rather that than him drifting in like behind and getting 2 goals. Like, if I was marking him tomorrow, it'd be a case of, and then again, you're also taking in the information here that he might get a bit narked, is, you know, you stand behind him. And now lads be saying, no, you don't stand behind your man. You have your hand on him, saying keeping him there. What they do then is they bunch up in around the 16-yard box, and he'll try and lose you there. So he'll run between you and another defender because he knows you're doing a man-marking job, and he'll try and get another player in front of you. So he'll run out past Graham Mulcahy and cut back, hoping he'll shake you there. So once you come into contact where you're in around a group of players, you grab his jersey by the scruff of the neck then, and he tries to run, he starts swinging his elbow back at you, butt of the hurl, and you start shouting at the umpire. And you're like a bucking bronco then, you're holding on to him, and if he wants to start giving out and whatever, but the ball is down on the other 45, so the referee is looking down at that. So you're holding on to him.
I love it.
And don't let him, because again, you just ask yourself, what does he want to do? He wants to go into a group of players, lose you, and then now he has the 10 yards of space. So once you see a group of players coming, hand on the back of the neck, you have his jersey caught, I don't care saying it, and run into that group of players and let Graham Mulcahy hit you, let Seamus Flanagan hit you, and like a buck and bronco, don't let go, hold on to him. And then once you get out of the group of players, let go of him again. Umpire's looking at you, referee might come in and talk to you, and he might say whatever, but now he's getting annoyed at you because you're not letting him do what he wants to do. But this idea of, we'll stand 50-50 and do it nice and fair, keep the hands off him and let him drift behind you, and I'm going to focus on the ball. We saw it twice yesterday, why you don't do that. So, like, there's a way. You're going to get a yellow card probably after a while doing it, but that's fine, take the yellow card and then see where it goes. But there's a likelihood where he could pull on you. Like, I'm not saying, and I don't like to say that now as if that's the type of player he is, but any player, I would say that about any player, if you were to hold on to him and pull and drag, a player could do something silly, you know. So if I was doing that tomorrow, again, and this is all, I say this all giving full credit to Gillane because he's an excellent player, but I think that's what you have to do. Keep him out in front of you, keep the ball out in front of you, so that you have your periphery vision on him and you know where the ball is, and that's all you need to know.
Yeah, Evan Ahern is in contact, James. We may as well stick on the last question on Gillane. Is Gillane the most informed hurler in the country at the minute, is the question. I would think with his finishing and the way he started this championship campaign, the way he stood up against Waterford the last day when, you know, the chips were down and other players weren't there, and he was still there as a big star and a big contributing scoring forward. Gillane's right up there at the moment.
He's top for me. He's my hurler of the year at the moment. Even despite yesterday's incident, like he was, you know, fabulous against Waterford. To be honest, there's no other way to explain it. He was very good yesterday, scoring was a 2-1 from play. He's mastered that art now of getting the ball behind you. So like Murph said, don't give him that advantage. But he's playing with extreme confidence. The players around him, see that he's a great person to feed the ball to. His touch is magnificent. He's always going to get it. You very rarely see him lose the touch. His hands are class. I can't say much more about him. Like, he's definitely an informed hurler. I was, again, after yesterday, up to yesterday for me, hurler of the year was Burns. After yesterday, it's Gillane. So, like, if you look at the odds now at the minute Paddy Power count, the first 6 lads who were down for hurler of the year are all Limerick lads. You know, so that tells you enough what you're about where they're at the minute. Yeah,
well, like, look, again, we saw Hegarty when the chips were down, and when he was required, some of the work that he got through, so, like, he at one point I think he took about 4 or 5 Tipperary players out with just the directness of his running, so he used to be right in contention too. For you, Paul, who's your current front runner for hurler of the year now with 2 rounds of the provincials left? So we still have plenty of time left in the championship.
Yeah, again, I think it's very simple. It's Aaron Gillane at the moment, just the way he's playing. Really important scores as well yesterday. 2 important scores. First of all, created that bit of a gap with the first goal, and you thought Limerick were going to kick on. Okay, they didn't. But then when they needed him again, coming down the home straight, got that goal, and you really felt after that goal went in, and how clever he did it as well. I know Cathal Barrett was giving out that he played the hurl. I looked at the replay. I don't think he did. I think his hurl was up there, but it didn't look like he played it. He caught it fair and square. And then when he turned, he didn't go for a swing. He just played it past the keeper, and just went, yeah, that's it, into the back of the net. Very clinical. But come away with 2-5. Any player at any stage of a championship, round robin, anything, any of your forwards come away with 2-5. That's brilliant going, especially the 2 goals. So, no, without doubt at the moment, Aaron Gillane. But it's amazing how much it can change, because, like James was saying, Diarmaid Byrnes up until yesterday, you were going absolutely, definitely. So it's going to be interesting over the next few weeks. Players will come to the fore, I've no doubt players will step to the fore. Even 1 or 2 Clare players, with the way they're playing, could step up that little bit more. And next week, we could be talking about someone else who's breathing down Aaron Gillane's neck. But at the moment, full credit to Aaron Gillane. He is hurler of the year for him at the moment.
Yeah, hopefully that answers the question which came in on Instagram from Dave Small 94. Does Gillane play the hurley? You will forgive all 3 of us who are north of Munster for using the word hurl. Hurl and hurley are totally interchangeable as far as I'm concerned, but for those of us who are raised north of Munster, it tends to be hurl as opposed to hurley. Also, Patrick Coleman making the point about this weekend. Clare well capable of getting to a semi-final in the All-Ireland. We were talking about how far they could potentially go. I don't see them being able to beat both Limerick and Waterford in the same year, though. Outside of the Munster campaign, it could happen in Munster, because Limerick, if they beat Tipperary, which happened on Sunday, are likely to then put out possibly a second team in Ennis. I wonder if that'll be the case after the way they hurled. And then Clare can beat Waterford in Munster as they did last year. So it's a tricky finish for Clare. Limerick, and then going into the Waterford game in the last weekend, they still have a lot to work to do despite the fantastic start that they've had. But James, we may as well talk about this weekend. Given what we saw from Limerick, given the high level that we've seen from Clare so far, how's this game going to go at the weekend?
I'm assuming now, Will, that Limerick put out their strongest team. If they put out a perceived second team, I think that sends all the wrong messages to that squad, especially after the back of yesterday's performance. If yesterday they produced a performance for the ages, then I would possibly look at a second string team or introducing some of the fringe players, you want to call them that. So I'm going to say Limerick are going balls out, best 15 as we Clare, and it's going to be a tight game. Ennis hasn't been the best venue for them. I think, if memory serves me correctly, they drew this year in the league. Go back a couple of years ago, then they got beaten in the last round of the championship round robin by Clare. Was that correct? I think it is, isn't it?
I think you're right. Yeah, it was the last year of the round robin. Yeah.
Yeah, they got beaten. So and again, we're going back to our old topic about the pitch. The pitch is bloody tight in it, right? I don't care what anybody says. It's tight in there.
Prepare the comments already. Go on.
I don't give a shit. It's bloody well tight, right? So Clare showed a good blueprint of how to attack the Limerick puck out on both sides of the ball. So on how to obviously structure their own and how to attack the Limerick one. So I'm very interested to see how this goes. I think it's going to be a game right there. I certainly cannot see Limerick winning this by the margins they've been winning to date. I don't see it being 6 or 7 points. I see it being tight. Clare have all the energy. Again, when you go into the question of matchups, how do they add up? And you look at their Clare forwards, and they've a right good mix of pace and they've a good mix of strength. So they're not found wanting in any particular department, especially in the forwards. And then their backs are in form. So all signs are shown that Clare are applying for a good performance. I'd say they're looking at this game now coming this weekend and saying this is nearly their, I won't call it their coming of age moment, but it certainly feels like it. Will they beat Limerick? Very hard to call. I can't say they do. I am still siding with Limerick. The margin of victory, I'm saying it's going to be low-ish. I'm talking maybe 2 or 3 points. But certainly Clare, and it's very interesting you touched on there, Will, about the Munster final. If Clare beat Waterford, then let's say then all things being equal, Limerick beat Clare in the Munster final. On one side of the draw, then you've got a whole host of teams. You've got an awful lot of teams. If Clare go the other route, they'll go the Leinster route, if you like, into the quarter final route. So you could potentially have Waterford, Limerick, a Kilkenny type team, because we're going to win Leinster. Throw the other side. So it's going to be. It could be these next couple of rounds will shape the championship massively. I know, of course, we're getting close to knockout stages, but if Clare beat Waterford and let's say whoever wins Leinster, there's huge things there to get on the final.
Point of information before I come over to you on this one, Murph. So 2019 Munster Senior Hurling Championship, which was the round robin last year, was actually the year that Limerick had beaten Clare. So that was 128-13. It was the year before that Clare had beaten Limerick at home, which would have been 2018. So there's a core group of players there with Clare who have beaten Limerick in the championship who are still around. But I had to do a quick check on the historical results just to be 100% sure on which year it was they'd beaten them. It's amazing how 2020 and 2021 kind of melt into one here. Limerick, by the way, have not beaten a Leinster team in winning their last 2 All-Ireland titles, if you want to look at it as Leinster geography, because they didn't play Kilkenny over the last couple of years. So you have to go back to 2019, the last time they played against Kilkenny, and they lost that semi-final. So let's see how the route pans out for both of these teams. But Clare and Limerick, Murph, how are you calling it? Who's going to win this one?
It changes again. If you asked me last week, I would have said Limerick. It's not as simple as that now at the moment. The reason I'll be saying it is, Limerick are going to come into this game a lot sharper. I've no doubt John Kiley will be cracking the whip now this week saying, listen lads, that's not good enough. And I think we'll see a few positional changes. If dealing with Limerick, first of all, I think we've seen the end of Kyle Hayes in a full forward, not because, I just think the running he has, the reason he went back to left half back in the first place is because he's just a gazelle up the sideline, and you want him to have that space where he can sprint into. So I think they pull Kyle Hayes out the field a small bit more. Maybe 1 or 2 changes, and as well, the lads who came on, like Boylan came on and was impressive enough. Graham Mulcahy was on the ball. 5 possessions yesterday. It wasn't a huge amount of tackling done. So it might be an opportunity for John Kiley. I agree with James. I think he's putting out a strong team. I don't think he's messing around because it wouldn't be good for Limerick now going into a Munster final. Let's say if they go down and put in a bad performance against Clare, or if they get bet by Clare, it does Limerick no good overall for the year for that to happen. But the thing is, let's say if we flip over to Clare's side, we looked yesterday, Ger Brown caused savage problems for Tipp. And the reason I think he caused problems, he asked a lot of questions of Limerick that maybe Limerick weren't ready to answer. He floated around. He didn't play where they expected him to play. He worked really hard. He popped up and got scores, and he had 3 points off Dermot Burns before they knew what was going on. What I look at Clare is, Clare have a lot more players who can do that as well. They could very easily, put obviously Tony Kelly being the obvious one, but Peter Duggan there, or Shane O'Donnell. There's lots of lads they could put out there that don't stick to the normal pattern, who could drift around, who could ask questions, and that's where you get your little bit of space that Ian Galvin could pop in for a goal. I think Clare could be a bit more clinical as well in front of goal. But again, the dynamic of being up in Clare, playing in Ennis, that is not simple at all. So I don't think it's as far apart as I did last week. I thought, if you asked me last week, I'd say Limerick go to Ennis and they maybe win by 10 points, all without being unfair to Clare. But I wouldn't be surprised this weekend if Clare turned them over. I just think that Clare are in good form. They're playing with a lot of confidence. They're enjoying what they're doing. They have no reason to fear Limerick because no one's going to expect them to beat Limerick, which is a great place to be in. So if we're sitting here next Monday talking about this amazing Clare win, I wouldn't be overly surprised, but your brain still has to go Limerick at this stage, because just if this Limerick team hits form, no one competes with them. It's a question, will Limerick hit form?
I wonder as well, Murph, whether if Clare were to win, just as a neutral, what it might do for the championship itself. Because then at that point, Clare can have every belief that they can beat the All-Ireland champions again later in this year. Clare automatically then become a major contender to lift Liam McCarthy at the end of the year. Limerick would actually probably get a different type of motivation, because you guys both mentioned complacency earlier. If Limerick were to lose a game, that would totally renew their focus for the rest of the season. As a neutral, I'm kind of hoping this is a Clare win, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's like you said, it'd be incredible, and it is. We're looking at nearly every match to see how does the ripple effects from each match play into the championship and the shockwaves that it send. Like you said, yeah, this would lay down a savage marker. It would bring another team that we didn't have really down for contention for an All-Ireland back into the mix. And what it really does then is go, it's a big win for every other team as well. If Clare do beat Limerick, it's a big win because everyone else goes, look, Jesus, Gillane can be slayed here. We can actually go and do it. Maybe it sows a little bit of doubt then in Limerick as well, because I've been part of teams there that, you take one defeat and it's not a case that you can turn around. Let's say 2013, Dublin bet us in the Leinster semi-final. Okay, we had players fit and stuff, but you're kind of trying to mend the doubts that the Dublin match put into you. So like if Clare go and beat Limerick, okay, Limerick still have players fit and they have Keane Lynch and these lads come back, but there's a little bit of doubt there that teams will try and tap into going forward in the Championship. Like Waterford, if they come and meet them again, they'll go, lads, if we hit these lads hard and we've seen how to get the doubt into their brains, well, that's what we do. And then, like, we're not even talking about Leinster. We're not even talking that, you know, Galway, we have Wexford to come to Nolan Park, we have Kilkenny and Dublin next weekend. Like, there's so many dynamics then that if Clare go and beat Limerick, like, I mean, the pack is wide open, but that's a big if. It has to happen first now. But for all of us watching hurling, it would be unbelievable if Clare go and turn them over, because what that means for the landscape of this championship, call it after that. Call it who's going to win the All-Ireland after that.
Not easy, but that's why we're here. And that's what we'll be doing in podcasts probably 14 and 15 as these provincials come to a close. Now, look, a mate of mine said to me last weekend, James, that like I seem to have a weekly rant on this podcast about, you know, different things around coverage and structures and whatever else. But I found a kindred spirit in the YouTube comments last week. Donncha Doyle. Patrick Horgan just became the top scorer of all time in the All-Ireland Hurling Championships. Nobody seemed to mention it last weekend. And there you are, Patrick Horgan, here on Wikipedia, because there's no central statistics on the GA website for this, has now scored 23 goals and 500 points. That brings him to 569, 2 ahead of Joe Canning. Albeit, Joe Canning is still ahead on average scores, because Joe got to his 567 in 5 fewer games than it took Patrick Horgan. But still, this should be a huge deal, James. I mean, you're a big NFL fan.
Yeah.
Like, whenever someone is getting to one of these records, like potentially someone's going to get the most touchdowns in the season, or every time that Brady seemed to reach, a passing yardage, the stats were always being pulled out. Like, the commentators were ready before it happened. This becomes a big issue. It's always a conversation going into the week of games in NFL, because American sports are so good at keeping records. Like LeBron James's records, over the years and whatever else. In the GA, it has that possibility of slipping by, because it's not really front and centre. Look, I appreciate that Cork lost, and Patrick Horgan would have probably preferred a couple of championship points for winning the game against Clare. But it's still some achievement for Patrick Horgan to now be the top scorer in the history of hurling. And it is something last week that kind of slipped by.
Oh, it definitely slipped by. And to be honest, I have to hold my hand up and say that when I saw that comment, that's when I became informed. You know, I didn't know either, truthfully. And like, if you go back to the American sports, so the Americans, I always say, are unreal at creating, hysteria around something that can be perceived as small over here. So if Horgan was taking part in an American sport and he's heading towards a major milestone, it'd be notified weeks in advance. There'd be projections about which game he'd make it in. There'd be projections about how far he'd go. Then he'd reach the milestone. They'd stop the game. They'd give him a round of applause, etc. And it creates this kind of, I won't say flamboyance, but like it creates this
pageantry.
It sells, like it really, really sells. Well, like it sells. You know what I mean? It really sells. Like when you're heading towards records, and it gets people involved. I myself track, Brady and track Gronk and all these lads for what records they're going to break, and when it's coming up, like I'm looking forward to. Do you know what I mean? Whereas in hurling terms, just our ability or lack thereof, should I say, to keep statistics is very poor form. And I think it's just pure. It's old style Irishness whereby. Asher, what's the point? You know what I mean? What's the point? Where there should be every point, like, and I think people like Patrick Horgan, and Shefflin and Canning and all these people who are breaking the records and they'll be broken again in the future, like they should be lauded, like for what they've done. Like the next thing now should be how far can Horgan go? Will he hit 600? He will. He'll, if he keeps going, he's still in great nick. Like, so he's another couple of games to go. He'll get 600 at some stage. So it's lost across the board. Like. Yes, we've some big milestones with regards to how many Irelands this lad has won, how many Ulsters they won, but I'd love to know who is the most sideline cuts in championship history, who is the most clean sheets, etc., who's the most red cards, who's the most yellow cards, Paul Murphy. So like, I'd love to know all these just if they do nothing else, they just create talking points, whether it be in social media, at the game, the pub, whatever it is, and that's all we want to do is create a bit more hysteria around the game.
I've got a sneaky feeling, Murph, the reason that this actually slipped by too was down to something else, which was that the Galway against Kilkenny game was the one on TV, and the Cork and Clare game where this record happened was the streaming game. So therefore it wasn't out in the public consciousness. And then, look, we're as much at fault as anybody talking about the handshake for 2 or 3 days after it happened, and that became the talking point out of the weekend, as opposed to Horgan taking the record over Canning. And obviously there was a bit of hype about Canning last year when he was closing in on it, and we knew that it was probably going to happen before the end of the season. Now Horgan is out there in front. And it brings me back to a point from last weekend, which was why were the 2 games scheduled at the same time? And like last weekend, we had 1 hurling game. It was a Joe McDonagh break weekend too. For me, it felt like nearly a chance miss, Murph, to actually have a hurling game on each day. Like, even if maybe the Leinster Championship had taken a break at a different time, or if there was a really high-profile Joe McDonagh game, we could have had more focus on that, as opposed to the GAA competing 2 of their big games of the year up against each other at exactly the same time the previous Sunday.
Yeah, definitely it was a trick missed, and everybody, it was well highlighted, and to be honest, it was more highlighted than Patrick Horgan actually taking over the all-time top scorer. But it was I suppose a silly move that 2 really good games. Now obviously, look, I suppose most people wanted to watch Kilkenny and Galway, but you're telling me there wasn't room for the Cork game somewhere there. Like, everybody wanted to watch it, and we all had to go about our ways about trying to watch it afterwards or whatever it was going to be. But and especially the game that it turned out to be, it was an absolutely brilliant game. But no, it was a silly one. And again, it goes back to the Irishness of sometimes these things creep in, and it's the same with the whole Patrick Horgan being the all-time scorer. That I remember when Henry became the top scorer, and I remember he did it in Croke Park. I'm fairly sure he took a free. I'm fairly sure Ger Canning was commentating, and he just went, and now Henry Shefflin becomes the top scorer, and the game carried on. There was a puck out, and I just think even if it was on telly, it wouldn't have got any great note. It might have been mentioned and people would have copped it, but we have this thing where we don't really mark it. Now, no one's asking for, I remember Steph Curry there, was it earlier this year, he took over the all-time 3-point record.
Yeah, they literally at that point took a timeout and allowed the moment to actually sink in.
They nearly burnt the place down. Ray Allen came down out of the stand and he hugged him, and I was saying it afterwards because I was comparing it. Cillian O'Connor, I'm fairly sure, is still the all-time scorer in football, and he did it in Killarney, and I was just saying imagine, I don't want it to happen, but I was just saying, you flip it across, Cillian O'Connor kicks the ball over the bar, Gooch Cooper walks out of the stand, comes down, gives him a hug. It's ridiculous. It's not what we want, but that's what the Americans do. But at least they acknowledge it. They acknowledge that that's a huge achievement for Patrick Horgan. We take it for granted Patrick Horgan was all-time top scorer in hurling, but let's say, being honest, Patrick Horgan started out as a young fella hurling away, had dreams of playing for Cork. Little did he know he was going to pass out Christy Ring, he was going to pass out Joe Canning, he was going to pass, he's the same age as Joe Canning, Henry Shefflin, DJ Carey. That's a huge thing for Patrick Horgan. And let's say all going well, some other player, Cathal O'Neill of Limerick or someone will come along and pass that out. It's just, I think it's a small bit of for the player itself, for a personal achievement. I'm sure it'll be marked some way, that something will be sent to Patrick Horgan or something by the GA. Maybe that's how it's marked. I'm definitely one that doesn't know how top scorers get marked in terms of trophies, but it certainly is something going forward, and it even feeds into the whole statistics area. We don't mark statistics, we don't record statistics. There's great work being done, and I think we see it on social media. We do see great stats being put together there, but again, that's very much down to individual. It's down to statisticians who are giving us their information that they're compiling because of that's what they do. But we don't have a centralized one, and we don't mark it when we could, because it's another angle to say, this is what you can aspire to. And Patrick Horgan may end his career as without an All-Ireland, unfortunately. He might, and he mightn't, but he most likely will finish his career as the all-time scorer in hurling, and that deserves a bit more of a fanfare than it got or might get.
I think there's a sliding scale about how we mark these achievements. On the one hand, you've got the absolute craziness of Buddy Franklin earlier this year scoring the 1000 AFL goal, and fans actually rushing the pitch. Yeah. And at one point, Zach Toohey is quite lucky that he didn't get badly injured. Players were actually genuinely in danger because of drunk fans on the pitch. And luckily enough, the guy who bounced off Zach Toohey went back and gave him his phone and his wallet afterwards, as opposed to going after to hit him. And then you look at, say, the craziness of the Steph Curry thing, even though there's a great pageantry about it all, they're on the kind of extreme end. But on the other end, there's nothing to say that, say, on the big screen, if it happened in Croke Park with Henry's, it couldn't go up on the screen, and maybe a moment could stop before the puck out comes out where everyone gives a clap. Or similarly with Horgan, that maybe it could be announced over the PA at Semple Stadium or something like that, where we come on kind of a bit slow to maybe to mark some of them. Maybe it's something that we can improve on, change on a little bit. Looking forward then to the fixtures this weekend. We've already touched on the game, which is Saturday night, Semple Stadium. You've got an intriguing fixture coming up Or sorry, that's not Semple Stadium. I had to go back on this. Hogan Stand if the fixtures are wrong. Clare and Limerick is 7 o'clock on Saturday, isn't it? I think.
4 o'clock.
No, it's 4 o'clock on Sunday. My apologies. Let me just take that out. They have the fixture in twice. Yeah. They were obviously waiting to see where that game was going to move to. So.
And Waterford Cork is it 2 o'clock?
It is. Walsh Park, yeah, they're both on telly, yeah. They're showing 2 Munster senior football games 2 weeks in a row. I wonder will they change that though? If Waterford beat Cork and Limerick beat Clare, I wonder will they change the TV schedule for the week afterwards? They might do.
100% they will, yeah.
They should do.
Yeah.
Because they're down to show the Tipperary Cork game in the last week.
Yeah.
See, of course, they probably committed to that thinking that was going to be a qualification decider. Yeah. Okie dokie, right, sure, look, we'll come off the back of that then. Looking ahead then to the fixtures this weekend, lads, we've already touched on the Sunday 4 o'clock game, which is the game of the weekend, which is Clare against Limerick in the Munster Hurling Championship. We might stick with Sunday and stick with Munster then, because we've got Waterford against Cork at Walsh Park, 2 p.m. on Sunday. Given Cork's start to the championship, this isn't maybe what we thought this was going to be. This, on the face of it, looked like it was going to be a real battle to see who was going to finish in the top 3. Cork's lives are on the line though. Like with the first 2 results, they have to win at Walsh Park to have any chance of qualifying. Do you give them any chance at this stage, James, of overturning Waterford, given what we've seen from Cork in the first 2 games?
Straight answer, I don't, to be honest. I think things are stacking up against them at the minute, and I think that just like a snowball effect now, Will, the more it rolls, the bigger it gets. And I just think, like, heading into Walsh Park, I've often said it's a difficult place to play, a very rapturous crowd. They feel like the crowd are in on top, yes, so it facilitates Waterford in the way they play. Tough conditions, most likely, with a breeze normal. Don't get the space that they'd like in like what they get in a Páirc Uí Chaoimh or a Thurles. So when I stack up everything up and look at it objectively, I can't really see how Cork win this, to be honest. Not trying to be too dismissive, but I just think Waterford is going to be a kickback in them again. They haven't been out in a couple of weeks, probably refreshed. So they want to get probably Cork one and done, get them gone and get 2 points on the board. I still think it'll be a very good game, entertaining game. But I'd say if you were to ask me about what'll the gap be in the end, I would say Waterford by 6 or 7.
Because Murphy, would take a big change around when you consider the way the league final went and the space that Waterford were able to get and the damage they were able to do to that Cork defence. And then you take Cork being demoralised with the way they've played in their first 2 games, the amount of chances that they coughed up in those first 2 matches against Limerick and against Clare. It would be a turnaround of all turnarounds if Cork were to keep that Waterford forward line quiet this weekend.
Yeah, it would be, and I think the main thing that Cork have to battle now at the moment is just the mindset, the bit of morale that's in the team, or maybe lack of the confidence in different things. Like looking at the table, even after Tipperary have played Limerick, Cork are still on bottom of the table on score difference. Okay, it's only by a point, but it's a tough place, and ideally, Cork would probably like to turn around Páirc Uí Chaoimh and steady the ship again and go back at it and do what they have to do, but. Waterford are concerned about themselves. Waterford are looking at Clare now going, okay lads, Clare could get a result here against Limerick. We want to be in a Munster final. We want to go the direct route straight to an All-Ireland final, and Waterford will be out to win. So I don't think Waterford really care, to be honest, what Cork are going to bring, and that's something Cork are going to have to deal with. Walsh Park, we've seen it, okay, bar Tipperary in the first half in the round robin phase. Tipperary got a hold of Waterford, but again maybe that crept back to, as we said at the time, Waterford maybe just being off the pace and Tipperary hitting them at 100%. I don't know if Cork can do that. I don't know if Cork are in a place where they can come out and hit Waterford with what Tipperary hit them in the first 30 minutes, and I think Waterford are well warned at this stage. I think Waterford are looking, okay, we're coming towards the end of this now lads, we want to be in control of our own fate here, we want to be in a Munster final most likely against Limerick, and we want to take the direct route, but we want to go straight down the middle, and we don't want to be leaving these cagey affairs down to winning by 2 or 3 points or anything like that. I think Waterford will come out and all guns blazing. I think we'll see Austin Gleeson start, and I think we'll probably, I suppose they'll try to get him involved in around centre forward. Tadhg de Burke didn't have a great game the last day, but look, I think their system will be well set up for in Walsh Park, that we'll see a very strong Tadhg de Burke there. I think they'll be all guns blazing. I hope to see a good kick from Cork here. I hope that they'll come and really put it up, and who knows, they could turn them over. I just don't see where it's going to come from at this stage.
It's a big ask, I think, at this stage. And for Waterford as well, James just put a bit of focus onto them. They'd be looking to dust themselves off. We said last week they didn't lose a whole lot in defeat to Limerick because of the fact that they had closed the gap a lot more than what they had seen in the previous 2 games. There was a lot to like about that Waterford performance, particularly the spell where they got the goals in the second half at the Gaelic grounds. And look, as Murph said, it's important for them that if you're going to get to a Munster final, this is a game they have to win. They kill a lot of hope for both Cork and Tipperary, who meet in the last round. If they beat Cork, they're pretty much into a Munster final if they were to win this. It's a big opportunity for Waterford to, again, lay down another marker, get another win against a rival, and put themselves into a very strong position to qualify for a Munster final.
Well, it puts results in their own hands, and it puts it beyond any reasonable doubt. Can you imagine now a situation in Waterford Sunday evening if Cork beat them?
And if Clare were to beat Limerick in the other fixture, then straight away it throws everything up.
Yeah, like in Clare would have 6 points in Waterford, are looking to get 4. So it just it creates an awful lot of turmoil for Waterford if they don't go the direct route. So there'd be no shortage of motivation from their perspective. I fully agree, Paul. The best way and the fastest way to get to an Ireland final is the shortest route, and that's straight up the middle, as you said. Get through Cork, get through Clare on your the weekend after, and move on. But like I agree with Paul. Like I think they'd assess probably the Limerick game and say yes, they made errors, probably made some positional errors, some tactical errors, if you like. They rattled 221 against them, so like it's not as if they were hammered out the gate. And Limerick performed against Waterford, to be honest. They did perform. They performed fierce well, and we were treated to a great game. So Waterford know in the back of their mind, even subconsciously, they have it in the locker. League champions. So if they just come with the correct attitude, they'll have the people behind them and they get rolling. And it's hard for me to, I know this sounds very bad now and disrespectful, but I don't want it to sound that way. But I'm looking at Cork right now and I'm saying, right, when they're playing Waterford the weekend, I'm hoping for a good game, but I have this feeling about the way Manchester United are at the moment. Everyone is saying their players are shutting off. I'm not saying Cork are doing that, but I just get the feeling if the game is tough and Waterford run them, Cork will just say, enough of this. Do you know what I mean? That's the way it kind of feels like. That's just, the year has been so, I won't say bad, but it's just been so far away from what they had hoped and what they had hoped to build on, say from a few months previous, especially when they were going so well in the league, that it's just like shut up shop, or even introduce a whole host of more than the 20 players we were seeing over the last couple of years and see can they blood some more guys and get some more championship minutes into them. So it's interesting to see what will happen, but I can't, when I do all the matchups together and I see how are Cork going to beat Waterford and how will Waterford beat Cork, it's overwhelmingly in favour of Waterford. I can't see how Cork tipped the scale, and they'll have to be reassessing for a few months' time.
Yeah, so Waterford against Cork, Wells Park, 2 p.m. Sunday. That game's in RTE2. It's followed by the second live hurling game in RTE2 to be the game between Clare and Limerick at Cusack Park in Ennis at 4 p.m. So that should be a really good afternoon of hurling in the Munster Championship. We've also got Dublin against Kilkenny live on Saturday night on Sky Sports Arena. Are going to be showing this one. This is a crucial game, James, because we'll get the Kilkenny camp in a moment for Murph on this, but huge fixture for both Kilkenny and for Dublin. Dublin put themselves in a great position after that win against Wexford. Kilkenny now looking to bounce back from the defeat in Salt Hill, and again at a time when there's 4 teams still active in the race to qualify in Leinster. This is going to have a huge say in who actually gets through.
Oh, it's massive. This is the game that will decide even the whole landscape of the table, I think. Because I am look, I won't say it lightly, I'm convinced that Galway beat Dublin in Pearse Stadium. So this is a huge game for both teams. But I've done my projection already, saying I do believe, and I stand by what I said last week, I think Kilkenny are going to win this weekend. I think they have to win this weekend. They know that themselves, because if they don't, it puts themselves into a bit of a humdinger with Wexford the week after. It'll be a do or die game for Kilkenny. They're either in or out with that game coming. So again, we just touched on what we said about Waterford. Take it beyond all reasonable doubt, and just try get through Dublin. But Dublin, they're playing well. They're beating what's being put in front of them. But this is a major test now. This is a huge big test. They performed fierce well against Wexford, but they didn't shoot the lights out. Wexford aren't a team that you could say, are at the top of their game. So in terms of how impressive the Dublin performance was in Wexford, yes, it was impressive, don't get me wrong, but I can't sit here and say they're automatically going to beat Kilkenny at home. That's not the case at all. And so Kilkenny are a different proposition. And I do believe Kilkenny, they're obviously hurting from last week, and they'll have rectified a couple of wrongs themselves. They'll be coming full of intent and try to get a job done, and I think they will, to be honest. Will TJ start? That's the question I have for you, Murph. Is he injured? I've heard rumours that his groin is up, is at him. That's why he's not at full tilt. So I'd be very interested to see what kind of forward unit he picks against Dublin. So tell me, Murph, Is T just starting?
Well, I don't
Get your
know.
crystal ball out there and see.
Yeah, my crystal ball. I need a crystal ball as much as anyone else, to be honest. I don't know. I don't know. Is he injured? I don't know. Is there anything, even to look into after Galway? Was he just taken off because, didn't have many possessions and different things? So it's hard to know. And look, it's hard to know what Brian does in terms of changes as well, because personally myself, I think from seeing the match against Galway, I think Alan Murphy will start, because I think Brian will be looking at is the work rate around the middle, that Galway kind of out-muscled them there, and something Alan Murphy brings is a savage work rate around there. I think David Blanchfield, I think Blanchfield might step back into that role, because in a wing back, I don't think we'll see him at midfield, but
So who drops out there?
Yeah,
James Maher, is it?
James Maher could be stepping out. Alan Murphy came on for James Maher. Was Conor Brown wing back the last day? Again, Conor Brown's a great player, but David Blanchfield had a great game. He was man of the match against Dublin in Parnell Park during the league. So, I just think, again, no more than John Kiley has taken his few bits from the match on Sunday against Tipp. Brian has taken his few bits, particularly in the loss against Galway, and going, how do I bring it to Dublin? I do think it's a good position for Kilkenny to be coming into, really, because Dublin coming off, let's say, the big win of the Wexford win, I think a small bit flatter. And again, the last time we saw Dublin come off maybe a flattering win was against Tipperary down below in Thurles. Kilkenny went up and absolutely hammered them. I don't think they're going to hammer them.
And in fairness, Dublin made hard work of Westmeath in the last game on the back of that win. So we were kind of thinking Dublin will look to push on, put the scoring difference up, and Westmeath were in that game with 7 minutes to go.
They were, and that this is exactly it. And we're looking for these trends of what Dublin sometimes do and how teams react. I know Kilkenny will react fairly savagely, because that was a sore loss to Galway, up in Galway. All things considered, it was a sore loss because it was a big match. It was hotly contested, a brilliant match for both sides. But I know that Kilkenny lads will come away from it going, Jesus, we need to kick on. We want to be in the Leinster final, and there will be that bit between the teeth to do it. And we also want to have the pressure on Wexford coming down to Nolan Park as well, which would be a huge thing. So that's where Kilkenny will be, and I think they'll come with a great aggression. There's great battles that are potentially to be there. I think Dublin would ideally like to have Owen O'Donnell on Owen Cody, the two Owens, but I don't think Kilkenny will let that happen. I think Kilkenny will keep Owen Cody in the corner, maybe out to half forward, and ask a few questions there. So the matchups will be really interesting. I think potentially even Mossy Keown could come in. Mossy Keown had a great game against Dublin, and not to say certain players hurl well against certain teams, but if you're looking for someone to step in on Owen O'Donnell, Mossy Keown is a very physical player, and not saying he's going there to preoccupy him, but Owen O'Donnell is a very important player for Dublin to hurl well. So there's a good dynamic to this. I think we're going to get a great game. I've played in Parnell Park. I could be wrong in saying it, but maybe the last time Kilkenny played in Parnell Park was 2018 in front of a packed house. We played that day. I came on as a sub because I was only back from overseas at that time. I think we're down by about 8 points, and we crept back and just about got it. I think Liam Blanchfield got a goal in the last minute to pip us over the line. But a savage battle, and I don't think the league battle will reflect what's going to or what's going to happen on Saturday night, because Championship's different. I think it'll be a great crowd. For the Dublin crowd will be there, and they'll be there in force, and we've seen how that Dublin crowd affects the game. They make it be very cagey. They feel like they're on the pitch. So I think it's going to be a savage battle. But the one thing I do know is that Kilkenny will come prepared. That they know that that's going to happen. We've played there so many times that most players on that pitch will have played in front of a Parnell Park in a packed house and feeling how tight it is. But I think it could be a really good game, because if we go back to that league match that Dublin played, or that Kilkenny and Dublin played in Parnell Park, Dublin had a great few chances at the start of that game to actually get a foothold in the game, and it kind of killed their confidence that they hit, I think, 3 or 4 wides at the left hand side of the goal in the start of the game. If they got those, Kilkenny were under pressure, but they didn't, and Kilkenny got their scores and kicked on. I think Dublin will be a little bit more clinical now on Saturday. I still expect Kilkenny to maybe win by about 6 or 7 though.
Yeah, half and I will be on scoring difference when it comes to the other two fixtures. So the 5 o'clock game is Laois against Galway at O'Moore Park. The Leinster Camogie final is on as a curtain raiser to that one beforehand. And then you've got Westmeath against Wexford, 6:30 at TEG Cusack Park. And you would think that Galway and Wexford would be winning those games, probably trying to run up a scoreline in case the teams go into the final round on the same amount of points. You've got 2 games in the Joe McDonagh Cup on Saturday. Really important one at Austin Stack Park when it comes to the composition of the table, because I think the losers of of this game are under serious pressure to try and qualify for the final. That is Kerry against Offaly. Now, Down will be looking to bounce back from their defeat against Offaly just before the break when they go to play against Carlow at Netwatch Cullen Park. And Carlow hurled very well against Antrim just before the break. That's a 2 p.m. start. And then the other game in the Joe McDonagh is on Sunday at 1 p.m. in Park Talton in Navan, which is Meath, who prop up the table at the moment. Took a heavy defeat against Kerry last time. 30 points was the difference against an Antrim team who can put themselves into the final if they get that victory at Navan. And it looks like it's pretty much a straight fight, with the Kerry, Offaly and Down being the teams who could potentially get to the final. So that Joe McDonagh with 2 rounds still to go is pretty open, especially for the second place. The other thing I wanted to touch on, lads, is a historic Leinster Minor Hurling final, which has now been fixed for next Monday in Portlaoise. Laois winning the coin toss. There's only been 3 finals ever in the history of the Leinster Minor Hurling Championship that hasn't featured Kilkenny or Dublin. They were the teams who were beaten in the semi-finals last weekend. Offaly and Laois will contest the final against each other for the first time ever. Since 2000, last time that Offaly won the Leinster Minor Championship was the 2000 year. They've only been to 4 finals since. As a quirk of the pandemic, they ended up playing the 2020 final in 2021. Cormac Egan, one of the star players on that hurling team that got to the final where they lost out to Kilkenny, and now he's kind of focused on football and went on later that summer to win an All-Ireland under-20. But Adam Screeney was the big star for Offaly the weekend. 2 goals and 8 points he scored. Was talking to a few Dublin people who were in at the game in Tullamore. Their feeling was this guy looks like he's going to be a star at senior level. His older brother is already a very good player with the Offaly under-20s and onto the senior panel too. So good family and good stock for the Screeneys. But he scored 2-8. Dan Ravenhill got a goal and 5 points. And there was just loads of drama because I bought the games on YouTube on TG Carr. You'll always hear me praise TG Carr. It's remarkable the breadth of coverage that they get up. These were noon matches on a Saturday. YouTube full streams of both games. So I bought them open in work, flicking between them. Looked like Offaly were comfortable when they went 7 or 8 points up. Put Laois and Kilkenny on. That game was a cracking finish. Laois put over a couple of late frees, which were remarkably well hit by Breen, their free taker. He put one over from at least 90 metres down the Abbey Leaks end to put Laois at that point 2 points up. It went into injury time. He put one to put them 3 points up. And the inevitability felt like Kilkenny were about to come back in. It was 1-15-15. Kilkenny got themselves a free just outside, maybe about 23 or 24 metres from goal. Laois did the classic thing of packing the line, and their goalkeeper came out and charged down the ball quite bravely. They blocked it, and somehow Laois managed to scramble the ball and get it out. Look, I know that Murphy's going to be hoping that Kilkenny will get to the minor final, but Paul, what a story to have these two teams into a final. They wouldn't have been fancied, particularly Laois, who had to come the long way around after the round robin, beat Wexford and beat Kilkenny to get to a final. Great work by Declan Qualter and by Derek McGrath, who's in there as hurling coach with Laois currently, for them to get to their first final since 2013, and also quite rare for Offaly to be in a final too. It's quite novel for Leinster to have these two teams meet, and crucially for them, they're both going to be in the last 5 of the All-Ireland no matter what happens.
Yeah, it's huge, and putting my, I suppose, Kilkenny loyalty aside, you have to give great credit to Laois and Offaly, and it's great, it's always great to see your underage hurlers, getting to finals. That's something that any county, regardless how they're doing, takes great solace in when you see that there's underage hurlers stepping up there, and for the Laois hurlers particularly, and I'm sure the Offaly hurlers feel the same. Like, the Laois lads going out the last day, like they have a Kilkenny jersey in front of them. And that's not talking up Kilkenny or anything, but they have a Kilkenny jersey in front of them. As much as, some other player goes out and sees a Cork jersey or Tipperary jersey, you're going out and playing a team that comes from a county that has a great tradition, and you go out and on full merit earn a victory. You're in the Leinster final. There's potential of having silverware on the table there for a Laois minor hurling team or for an Offaly minor hurling team. And for a county like Offaly as well, with the great tradition they have, the fact that, haven't won it, as you're saying there, since 2000. Again, that'll be hotly contested because as it stands, either of these teams have done a savage job so far at getting to the final, beating the two favourites really, I suppose, in Dublin and Kilkenny. And I suppose bucking the trend of the teams that would traditionally be in the final. So it is brilliant for them. And again, I suppose they won't want to rest on their laurels here. They'll actually want to go out and win a cup, because it'd be a great story for either county to actually go along and grab a cup and see what happens after that. Step out into the All-Ireland series after that. But if you could go and lay down a mark and get a bit of silverware on the table, that takes a great boost for whichever county does it internally within the county for hurling, to get a bit of silverware back in the table. So yeah, look, like I said, putting my Kilkenny loyalties aside there, it's fantastic to see it, and it's great for Leinster hurling again to see this competitiveness at underage and different teams filling the void.
Yeah, Ben Deegan scoring 10 points for Laois, including those 2 late frees, which came in injury time, which proved crucial in that 3-point win. The other thing, James, when it comes to this, like 2 novel, unusual teams getting to the final, is that they've got guys who've developed hurlers in other counties who've helped them to get here. Now, Declan Coulter's very much the manager with Laois, but Derek McGrath's been involved for the last couple of seasons as a hurling coach, bringing his expertise. And in Offaly's case, they were able to prize one of their own back out of Limerick to manage them. So Leo O'Connor has been their manager for the last couple of years. Last time he was involved, I think, with Limerick, I'm going to say it was like 2014 to 2016. You know, some decent players like Kyle Hayes were on that minor team that got to an All-Ireland final. So he was heavily involved in preparing a team that went on to become All-Ireland champions. It's amazing how that little bit of expertise, you know, working elsewhere can actually give a boost to a county too.
Oh, massively, yeah. And, you know, the question I'd always ask is how can we spread that expertise in other counties? You know, I know it's great for Laois and Offaly, and that's the teams we're focusing on at the moment, but if you think on a broader scale, let's say, how do we grow this in Westmeath? How do we grow it in, you know, in the Carlows, in even Roscommons, all that? And I think it's expertise from the top counties, to be honest. So you need people from Galway, Kilkenny, Tipperary branching over. So if I'm in a county board or in any kind of position of I suppose, structure in a county, I'm trying to get these people on board, because look what the effect it has. Now, Rome wasn't built in a day, and it won't be done overnight. It's a long process. It can be a tedious process. It can be sometimes it can sap the energy out. Yeah, when you shift some beatings through the midst of rebuilds or generating youth, but like it has to be done. And if you go even broader again, Will, for the greater good of the game as a whole, even if you're to compete against the other sports, the footballs, the rugby's, we have to branch out into the smaller counties who are not Division 1 at the minute. But like it's mighty. I personally love seeing the likes of the Laois and the Offaly's coming in. Like, I grew up watching Offaly's in the 90s, like, and you want them to get back to the top table, and it all starts at the bottom with your kids, let's say. So that's where Limerick have come from. I know everyone has seen it at the moment, and everyone's caught up in the moment with Limerick being in a force of domination at the minute. But that all started 10 years ago. You know, that started with Keane Lynch at 13, at 14. And grand, the argument would be said, these lads would nurture themselves. No, they wouldn't. No, they would not. These guys didn't forge themselves. A hurler at that age is not forged, like, unless he's got the sound advice from adults, let's say, who have done it before, who know what they're about, have experience and have stature in the game. So that needs to be transported over to the smaller counties. And I think that's not, I won't say that's a problem for the counties, it's a problem for the GAA as a whole, and that could lead us into a different debate entirely.
Oh, that's a wider debate for some weekend where we've got no fixtures on, and we can have a chat in much longer length on the Hurling Pod about it. That is episode 12. A great weekend of hurling ahead of us, and that Leinster Minor final will be played this day next week. So we're recording on Monday currently, so it's next Monday, 7:30 in O'Moore Park in Portlaoise. Should be a great occasion for those two Midland counties as well. Lads, great to talk to you. Looking forward to looking back at the penultimate round in Leinster and Munster next week.
Cheers, lads.